Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Today is the first day of True North Health Week. I love when we do theme weeks on the show, and every day for the next 7 days, we will be having someone who works at one of my favorite places in Santa Rosa, California, the True North Health Center. And who better to kick off True North Health Week than their executive chef, Chef Ramses Bravo. Please welcome him to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time on your day off to talk to us.
Hey, AJ. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because before I ever went to True North, I met you and I said to you, why do they need a chef at a water fasting center? What do? Serve them water?
Yeah, but then they got to eat after the whole water thing.
You have such an interesting story, Chef Bravo, because you came from a traditional background of being a chef. You worked at a hotel, you went to culinary school, and now this couldn't be any more different, I don't think.
That's true. I was born and raised in my grandmother's kitchen, basically, and then I have been in kitchens since probably 8 years old, and that was sort of my playground. And I always knew that I wanted to be a chef when I grew up. Not that I'm grown up yet, but I always knew that was going to be my career path. However, I never once intended or thought about doing the particular area that I'm doing, which is plant-based and SOS-free. That never crossed my mind. But here I am. I've been at True North now 14 years and 1 month.
I can't believe it. That's amazing, especially considering how different it is. In case somebody is watching that has never heard the term SOS-free, what does that mean?
So SOS-free is a term that refers to cooking, where the SOS stands for sugar, oil, and salt free, which means that no oil from a bottle or from a jar is added, no salt from no refined salt, basically. So no, seasoning of the food, as well as no refined sugar. So no powdery substances, nothing that comes from a box or a bottle. However, natural occurring salt, oil, and sugar is completely okay. So a quick example would be avocado. There is oil in whole avocado, so that'd be okay. Salt and greens like Swiss chard and beet greens, so that's totally fine. And then any sugar from whole fruits like apples and mangoes and all of that, that's okay.
Yeah, that must be very different than what they teach in culinary school.
Very, very different, yes.
Yeah. Did it sound bizarre to you when you first heard this?
Very. When I was interviewing for the job at True North, it was bad enough that they said vegan, because vegan is not sexy at all for people who are chefs. It's more of a pain on the rear customer type of thing.
But it might be sexy for some of the people that eat that way.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, my point of view of it was just weird, crazy, difficult, when I was interviewing for the job. So that was bad enough. And then, my boss, Alan, started going on about the SOS-free part. And that was just, to this day, I still don't know how it is that I took the job, knowing, my state of mind back then. It was just, I don't know. I'm very happy that I did, but it's crazy to think that suddenly the very building blocks of what I learned about cooking were suddenly taken away from me, and now I still had to make it work somehow. And I did, and we still continue to do it in the kitchen, but it's just very, very different.
Well, SOS-free is different than just vegan cooking. I mean, because most people that are vegan eat sugar, oil, and salt.
Correct. You can be a very unhealthy vegan person, and you're very overweight, very malnutritioned, actually. It's not that vegans eat nothing but lettuce and salads. They can eat Oreos. Oreos are vegan. They can eat deep fried onion rings, for example. Lots of candy, soda, Slurpees.
That was
Uh,
me.
yeah, all of that fits into that vegan category. So you can be very unhealthy. So I always prefer the term plant-based because you get most of your nutrition, most of your calories from whole plants versus, soda machines.
But wasn't it true that you yourself were actually overweight when you started working there, yet you were not vegan?
Correct. I was definitely overweight. I weighed definitely over 200 pounds. 205, 210, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. And you lost what, like 40 pounds since working there?
It's gone up and down a little bit. Like recently, I lost a bunch of weight because I actually gave up alcohol. Beer is still vegan.
Yeah.
But I just decided to take a break from that, and I replaced that with a lot of exercise lately. And it actually, thanks to you, I got started on that because you took me to Mexico on that retreat that we went to, and it was like hike in the morning, pickleball right after breakfast, go swim, go to the gym, and then there's stretching, towards the evening before dinner, and then you could still go out and play basketball. So I thought I was like sort of fit, because I exercise 3 to 4 times a week. And in those days, it was like 3 or 4 times a day. So I was like, I can actually do this, so let me take a break from the dead empty calories from the alcohol and just do more exercise. And here I am. When I first started at True North, I probably lost about 30 pounds, and I wasn't trying. I was just doing the job, eating the food, just trying to make sure that it was tasty. I was eating most of my meals there, and suddenly I lost a bunch of weight without really trying. And it was eye-opening, really, because I never intended to be a True North as long as I have. My idea was to take the job, learn something about vegan, just because I knew next to nothing about vegan. And then 6 months later, move on, get back to, a real job, get back to real cooking. But that experience, that big change in myself, was huge for me. So my weight dropped, like I said, about 30 pounds, and my energy shot up tremendously. I could suddenly keep up with my 2-year-old daughter at the time, and I could run around and play with her. And that was very valuable to me. And along with that, I was able to see the changes that, we were able to do for the guest. So it was like a big turmoil. It's like, well, I don't want to work here because this is not what I trained for. This is not real cooking. And yet I'm looking at a huge positive impact. So what to do. And I was sort of in that, trying to figure out which way I really wanted to go for a number of years, probably 6, 7 years, until I finally was like, oh, okay, sure, I'll get serious about the job now. And like I said, 14 years, 1 month.
That's fantastic. Have you seen some miracles occur in some of the patients there?
Yeah, I've seen, I don't know the word miracle would apply, but one of my favorite patients there was there for long-term. Susan, she recovered, she got her eyesight back. She came into True North, she could barely walk and needed eye surgery. And she didn't really want to do surgery, and she just decided to eat the food. And a few months later, she had dropped a whole bunch of weight, and she could see again. So, that's pretty miraculous.
That does sound like a miracle to me if you get your sight
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. And then she went back to the doctor, and I think she said that the doctor thought she had gotten surgery from somebody else. So she was like, "You've been cheating on me with another eye doctor." Like, no, I just ate clean.
Yeah,
So
they didn't believe it.
no, they didn't.
Yeah.
So, and there's other ones, people, come in taking in 14 different types of medications. They leave and, maybe one or none. We've reversed diabetes for people. We do treat cancer patients. I don't know, I'm not allowed to know medical information on people, but we do treat people with cancer, and we've seen some good results. I don't know if we totally cure them, but I would suspect we made a big improvement for them. And so, yeah, and we see a lot of people who lose a whole bunch of weight, and they're very happy, and, they leave with a good problem to have, which is, getting a whole new wardrobe.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, that was my story. I came there 50 pounds heavier, and now 10 years later, I'm not, thanks to True North. So I can't speak highly enough about the place. I just so thankful it exists. And what can I say? I wonder, Chef Bravo, Dr. Goldhammer often tells a funny story about, I believe the gentleman was a union worker who said that the food was tasteless swill. And if he's going to eat this way, just get his shotgun and shoot him. And then after the fast, he said, well, your darn chef finally got the hang of it.
Yeah, he tells that story often.
Is that true? Has that been your experience with people, that they come in because they have to come in eating and go out eating? For a water fast, that at first they really don't care for the food, but after the fast, all of a sudden you're a better chef.
Yeah, it's a very common occurrence because people are so used to the heavy, salted, oily type of food. And so when they first come in and they're sort of revving down to go into their fast, and suddenly there's no added salt in the food, it can be tasteless for people. It does take about 2 weeks to reset the taste buds. We shorten that time span for people if you do a water fast. So instead of having to eat the same food for 2 weeks and thinking, oh my God, I just can't get any flavor out of it, you do a few days of water fasting, and suddenly, boom, we speed up the process. But yeah, once the taste buds readjust, people are like, oh my goodness, the chef is finally getting the hang of it. Yeah, it's common.
It's so great. It's like taste bud rehab, because I mean, food tastes so much better to me now than it did when I was, in the pleasure trap. I mean, I really enjoy the taste of my food much better now.
Yeah, it's because Alan tells that story, and I hear it often from people. I'm kind of not interested in it anymore. What I really sort of hone in on for people, and what I'm actually more interested in, is finding out what their experience is of, now they tasted the clean food and they can taste it and they think I'm doing a good job. But what happens when they have that first bite of that overly salty, overly oily food, which to them was completely normal? And there's a lot of like, oh my God, this is so salty, I can't eat it. I just literally cannot eat it because it's so salty. And my response is like, well, that's exactly what you were eating before, So, just think about that. How much added oil and salt and overly sweet things you were eating, and you thought that was okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that restaurants use more salt and oil than a home cook would at home.
Yeah, that's true. No.
Yeah. And what's the reason? Is it because it makes it hyper palatable and they'll eat more? Because it's just I just don't enjoy eating at restaurants anymore.
Like I said, it's ingrained in every cook and chef to make sure that every bit of food is properly seasoned. So, I grew up, when I did my chef's training, we all had this fear of God if the chef came into your station and tasted something, one of your sauces, one of your dressings, one of your prepared items, and if it didn't have enough salt, you would get kicked off the station. And then that was a big box of shame where everybody would look at you and know that you did not season your food properly. So that's one part of it. And then there's also this sort of high-end, kind of thing where there's a regular salt, like cooking salt, that you use to make sure there's enough flavor and everything. And then there's something else, which is the finishing salt, which is like that very last sprinkle of a fancier, freshly ground salt that is added at the very end when the plates of food are about to go to the customer.
Wow. People can add salt at the table though. So what is the purpose of cooking with it? Because doesn't it largely dissipate? Like, for example, if you're cooking it in a soup, for example?
At TrueNorth's, we don't have any, added salt at any point in time. So neither in the cooking process nor at the table. My job there is to make sure that every step is taken so that the flavor is maximized, so that there is no need for salt during cooking or after. I know that some other programs allow that, sort of at the table. And everybody's sort of at the different, parts in their life. Like I said, somebody who's never experienced this type of food, if they eat it, they're like, oh my God, this is tasteless. So I would say something like, okay, you want to do a healthier lifestyle. How about you eat some of this food, and as you start to neuro adapt and your taste buds adjust, sure, add it at the table, and then as you go along, use less and less of it, and then you'll get there.
Yeah, it seems like salt is the hardest for people. Oil doesn't seem all that hard for people.
The easiest one is sugar, because you can always replace it with fruit, dried fruit juices, dates. But there's actually a very close relationship between the amount of oil that you use and the amount of salt that you need in order to get food into the dish. Because if you use a lot more salt, a lot more oil in the cooking, what happens is that as you take that bite of food, the oil coats your taste buds, and it's sort of like a blanket over them. And then they can't really register the other stuff that's in there. So that's why you need more salt in order for those flavors to be detected. And then the message travels from the taste buds to the brain saying, oh, this is mangoes or mushrooms or whatever the case may be. So the idea for us is that if we don't cook with oil right away, we diminish the amount of the salt that we need in order for people to taste the food.
Right. Do they give a reason in culinary school what the purpose of oil is? Because people think like, well, you can't cook without oil. They think it's not even possible to saute without oil.
Correct. That's a practice that's been done for centuries, millennium probably. You always cook with a little bit of oil, and people don't realize that it's that there's a different way to do it without it. So I never got an explanation as to why we use oil. It was just a universal understanding that that's the way you do it, and it was never questioned.
But oil didn't always exist. That's the thing. And I don't think all of our ancestors actually did cook with oil.
Right. So you'd have to go back probably, I don't know how many thousands of years, but certainly, in the caveman times, oil came from, whatever nuts they could scrounge up. And, whoever the lucky guy that first stumbled upon avocados, boy, I bet he was happy. So, and then, somebody figured out, I don't know if you've ever bitten into a raw olive.
They're not very good.
No, oh my God, it's like the super like astringent taste, and that you can't get the taste off your mouth for a long time. Um, so I don't know how they figured out that they could, squeeze them and get oil out of it, and that was something that they could use. But at some point, somebody figured, oh, we have this, thick, oily substance, can we cook with it? Oh yeah, look, it turns out pretty good. So let's do it from now on. And now, generation after generation after generation after generation, it's always been done that way.
Yeah. I think it's harder to get traditional chefs to understand the SOS-free part of a health promoting diet than even the vegan part, because as someone who's produced 19 conferences, it was never really hard to get a restaurant or a hotel to cook vegan. They've heard of it before and they could do it. But when you tell them no oil, no salt, they've even heard of no sugar, because the hotel that we ended up going with said, oh yeah, we have this food addiction or OA group every year, so we know how to make food without sugar, but oil and salt, they just were like, I can't be done.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to request that from a chef, and then his mind suddenly go, like, no, that's not possible. Because again, it's been done like this for so many years that you never question it, that this is the way it's always done. Saute, cook with a little bit of hot fat. That's the way it's done. That's written in the definition, and that's the way you do it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, if you're like, well, do it like that, but without the oil, they're like, it doesn't compute in the chef's brain. It certainly didn't in mine, when I took the job. Like I said, I still don't know, how it is that I took the job, but I did, and I figured it out.
How were you able to translate this to some of the people in the kitchen, because they had to understand this too, right? The sous chefs, because on the, obviously you have to have a day off, so they had to learn these techniques as well, correct?
I was lucky that they had some kitchen personnel that was competent enough, that were already in place. So I was coming in to be the leader of the staff that was already there. So that was actually very helpful, because I did not have to bring in a whole new staff and then sort of learn this thing myself and then teach it to this new personnel as we went along. Now, as time went on, I would bring people in to the kitchen week, because we would expand and we needed more staff. And so it was easier to do it sort of one at a time, when there were others that were already following, the specs that we needed to do. And so that was easier, once I had already understood it myself, and there were others that, were already on board. Now, as we brought them in one at a time, that was a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Ellen Goldhammer, as you know, is the co-author of The Pleasure Trap. Have you ever read that book?
I read parts of it, little bits and pieces. I think there's a lot of hidden humor, like dark humor in there. If you know Dr. Goldhammer, you know that the way what he finds amusing. And so maybe to somebody reading it is not humorous, but to me, reading it and imagining him talking, saying these words, I'm like, oh my God, he's laughing right now.
Right. Did it help at all to understand the concept that he talks about of the pleasure trap, to understand why he was telling you not to use sugar and oil and salt?
No, it did not, because I saw him the same way I still see him and all these other doctors who are great human beings, who promote this type of diet, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Colin Campbell, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Who else? Bernard, and Dr. Greger. So all these amazing human beings promote a very healthy way of eating. But as a chef, I look at them as like, yeah, this is great. You tell people that this is a going to make them very healthy. But if it doesn't taste good, people are not going to eat it. They'll eat it once and they're like, yeah, I'm done with that. So know that the pleasure trap that did not help me, because I understand food in a different way. It doesn't matter how healthy it is. If it doesn't taste good, there's no use for it. Whether you're a steak and potato guy or a kale salad person, if any particular dish does not taste good, there's no use for it. No one's going to eat it. And so that was, my focus. How do I make this taste good so that people will actually eat it, enjoy it, and want to eat it again? Whereas, their, medical mentality is like, oh, eat this, and you'll be healthier. Makes perfect sense. To a doctor, absolutely. To a chef, no, it's different.
Have you ever thought about the fact, though, that meat, people that say they love it, they generally just aren't eating raw meat, but the flavor is coming from the plants, the ketchup, the barbecue sauce, the mustard. The plants are what's making meat delicious.
Yes and no. It's sort of a relationship. So, a barbecue sauce, which is comprised of tomatoes and chilies and spices and all that, it can never taste as good if it doesn't come along with a braised hunk of meat, and that braised piece of meat can never taste as good without the barbecue sauce. So it's put them together and it's you come up with something very tasty. Now, my approach is, okay, how do I capture that delicious end result without the piece of meat? And that's been sort of my strategy, so to speak. I don't try to replace something, like what can I make that's going to taste like ribs? No, what can I make that's going to taste very delicious? And while I use barbecue sauce in with it. So, because I cannot make any sort of plants taste like ribs, but I can make plants taste very delicious. And so now if I see a rib loving person who's like, sure, you can have your ribs and they're going to taste good. I know that because I've had them in the past and they're tasty. However, here's another option. Eat this other dish that uses barbecue sauce and it'll be very tasty, not exactly the same because it doesn't taste like ribs, but it's very delicious. So now if you're having this sort of craving for barbecue something, you can always go back to your tried and true, ribs, and it'll be good. Or you can try this other thing that's also going to be good and satisfying. Okay. So now what I've done for you is giving you a 50-50 chance of choosing a healthier option. Yeah. And if you happen to choose the healthier option and you like it, then what I've done is opened up your mind to say, oh, I wonder if this guy can make other things that I normally wouldn't eat taste good, so that maybe I'll try them also. And so that opens up the door a little bit for me. And then, they taste other things that I make. And then suddenly they're like, oh, I never knew that, this plant-based stuff that was actually tasty, and this guy's making all these dishes. And sure, I still like the ribs, but I also like this other stuff that he's making, right? So now there are more options. He can always go back to the ribs, but now there's all these other plant-based options that he could have. And suddenly, I've increased their odds of choosing a healthy dish. And that's as good as I can do, I suppose. And then because at that point they decide how much of the plant-based they want to eat, they figure out what their goals are, they start to feel better, and then they're like, hopefully they do less and less and less of the ribs.
Yeah, and they get off their medication and they lose weight and things like
right.
that. What are some of the favorite dishes you've created over your 14 years at True North that the patients just go nuts for?
The lasagnas are always very popular. The pumpkin curry soup is big. The wild mushroom soup. What else? Some of the dressings, the dating mustard dressing, the lemon parsley dressing. I recently made a mole dish, and people were raving about that. What else?
Many of these recipes can be found in one of your two books, Bravo or Bravo Express.
No, not all of them,
Some of them
because
can, some of them.
a lot of them. But what happens is, as you know, as the chef, we just cook, and then we try new things. We can't make the same things over and over and over, because then we get bored. And so we're constantly coming up with new things. Yeah, but definitely the lasagnas, the French toast also. French toast is the big one. So yeah, those are some of the most popular ones.
I think you probably know, even if they don't articulate it to you, by how much is left at the end of the meal. In the
Right.
tray.
So we can see what their opinion of it was when we collect the plates. Absolutely.
Has there ever been one dish that just didn't fly?
Yeah, there's a duds here and there. They don't happen very often, thankfully. And the fact that I had traditional chef's training I think that was my saving grace. I don't think without having gone to a proper chef's training, I would have been able to do as good a job as I do, because understanding food is very important. Understanding how to make it taste good. It goes far, far beyond just reading a recipe and following it. There's a lot of understanding as to why the ingredients go well together. That I needed all those skills in order to do my job. It does happen where I'm thinking, this will work because, so and so and so. And every once in a while, they're like, no, this didn't work. And I can't save it. So we're just going to scrap it.
I'm just curious if you remember what the dish was. And I'm wondering if by any chance it included buckwheat, because that's like the only thing I don't care for.
I don't, usually when dishes don't work, we made them once, we tried them, it didn't work. And so we move on. And there's so many things that we have to get done in the kitchen that we don't, put it this way. We seldom take notes on the dishes that work really well. We certainly don't take any notes on the ones that don't.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm wondering when and how you learned about something that's taught at True North quite a bit, calorie density, because when you go to a regular restaurant and you order a side of vegetables, for example, asparagus, you're lucky if you get 6 spears. Often it's 3. And at True North, a serving of vegetables is a pound. So how were you able to adapt to that? And did you learn and understand the principles of calorie density, why these patients, even while they were trying to lose weight, needed to eat a lot more food than you were used to serving them at the hotel?
Alan sort of gave me a crash course on it at the beginning. And I was like, okay, sure. They obviously, if they're not eating meat, we need to give them, more vegetables. But really what sort of gave me the reality check of what the volume needed to produce was, again, people saying, hey, we need more, we need more, we need more. And so we developed a sort of an amount of food that we needed to cook. And then we could see, as we check into the food area, how much people were grabbing, like you can see the plates and the size of the portions. And in the beginning, I was like, Jesus Christ, how much freaking food can these freaking people eat? That's it's not normal.
Right.
But it was like, it wasn't normal on day 1, it wasn't normal on day 20, and it wasn't normal on day 39. It wasn't normal on day 76. And then at some point I was like, well, I guess that's how much they eat, and we can't, we're just gonna go with it. It was years later then I understood the science of it. So that was sort of my training on calorie density. Yes, when you go to a restaurant, a portion of asparagus is three spears. 6 is a double portion, and they're going to charge you accordingly. And that's just the way it is.
Well, that's the thing, because they don't understand that oil is 4,000 calories a pound. And when you take it out of the food and you're eating just plants, you don't have very many calories.
Correct. But like I said, when you work at a restaurant, the thought process is very different. Calorie density is not something that you ever talk about or learn or understand. You understand weight and you understand profits. And so if you're filleting a fillet of salmon, they're like, okay, every portion has to be 8 ounces, and we're going to charge this much for 8 ounces of fish along with the other stuff. And if you have 8 ounces of fish plus the 4 ounces of the potato that's going to go with it, and then the couple ounces thing of the asparagus and whatnot, and then the 2 ounces of sauce and the garnish on top, that all equals to about a pound of food. A pound of food will get them satisfied, and this is how much we can charge for it. This is how much we need to charge for it, and that's how the the amounts are put together, both in weight and prices. As far as calorie goes, there's no thought to that, okay? Because the idea is make it as rich and tasty as possible so that they come back. That's the goal.
Wow, 1 pound of food would not satisfy me, because most of my meals are like 3 pounds of food. But of course, they're not rich like that. So maybe you could shed some light on if what I've been saying is true, the truth about restaurants, because I worked in a restaurant for 5 years. I was the pastry chef, so I had my own kitchen, but I still went into the main kitchen and I could see the process. And I tell people, especially people that are suffering with food addictions, where, one slip could send them down a dangerous path, or people that are trying to lose weight, that it's, I don't want to say impossible, but virtually impossible to get an oil-free and salt-free meal in a restaurant, because people, when you go to a restaurant, they're not making your food in that minute. They've pretty much prepped everything in advance. Is that not true?
For the most part, yeah, they prep most of it in advance. And if there's anything that has any sort of assembly needed to it, it's already been prepared. So mashed potatoes don't get done, what's called a la minute, like at the moment. Some sauces do get made that way, but they occur because they're using the pan where they sear the piece of chicken or whatnot, and then they add the ingredients and the liquids and whatnot, and boom, there's a sauce that went with that. But any sort of starch based item, anything that got braised or grilled or roasted, all that's done ahead of time. For the most part in restaurants, what does get cooked to order is the hunk of meat, whether it be the chicken, the fish, or whatnot. And then most everything gets heated up or sauteed. Sauteing does happen, as the orders come in. But more than anything, it's just that every chef and every cook knows how you start. You get the pot on the stove, you get it hot, you add the oil, the butter, or the duck fat, or the lard, whatever it is you're going to cook with. And not until that pot and that fat is hot do you start? And, once you got it nice and hot, then go and make sure you keep up with all the other cooks that are cooking all the other things.
Right. So they don't just grab a new set of pots or boil a new thing of water. It's already got the oil and the salt in there. I try to explain to people that's why it tastes so oily and salty, even when you say no oil or salt.
Right. So any vegetables that get cooked ahead of time, anything that gets cooked ahead of time, it's always cooked with salt. Always.
Yeah.
Always, always. It may not always have oil because the oil does come, later on. But anything that's pre-cooked, always, always, always is salted.
Absolutely. What I'm not understanding is why some restaurants need to put oil in things like rice, because I make rice all the time. And I know a lot of people, friends that are Asian that have been making rice their whole life. They don't put oil in rice.
You do find some restaurants that are more sort of understanding of that. And I find that Asian restaurants have this cooking method, which is called steam. So Asian culture cooks a lot of things by steaming. So they understand that you don't have to have the oil in the pan ahead of time. You can just put the stuff in there, whatever steaming apparatus, and boom, there you go. So steaming is a legit way of cooking in Asian cultures. So you have a easier time finding something that you can eat at an Asian restaurant than you would at an American restaurant. However, the salt thing is still going to be there, because I don't know of any culture that does not use any salt in their cooking.
I think there's like one tribe, I want to say the Yanomamo Indians, that there's one tribe, they're athletic, and there's some population out there that actually doesn't use salt, and they have wonderful blood pressure. I'd have to check what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So like you mentioned that the sugar is the easiest, because I find that you can make a vegan dessert without sugar and nobody will know that it's vegan without sugar.
Yeah, I do it all the time. And for people that are at True North, they obviously know that I don't cook with sugar, so they assume right away. But sometimes I'll take some of the stuff home and give it to the family. And they love it. And it's funny, they're like, is this from work or is this from somewhere else? Like, no, it's a legit dessert. You like it? Yeah, it's really good. All right. Then it doesn't matter where it came from.
That's great. Could you tell us, most of the people this week on the show actually do private consultations, like coaching for patients. And I know that you don't do that, but you've created something, several courses to help people learn how to cook the way that you cook. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm actually been meaning to talk to Alan, because a bunch of people have asked me, like, are you part of the coaching calls? So essentially, at True North, you can call in and choose to speak with one of the doctors and basically do like a phone consultation. And I think it's a good service that we provide. I do that over Zoom, but I do it through my own website, which is bravopb.com. So Bravo is my last name, and then PV, which are the initials for plant-based. So I do make those sort of calls with people. But along with being able to do that for people, to do that sort of streaming consults, the website also has my online cooking courses, where I take somebody and I assume that they have no cooking skills, or they have cooking skills, but the whole new plant-based and SOS-free is totally new to them. And I just take them along from, square one, and take them all the way up to, yummy desserts, and, every step along the way, where this is how your kitchen should be set up so that it's easier for you to cook in. And this is how you use a knife, because it's not just about holding it and then, whacking at the items. There's a proper way of cutting. And then, okay, sauteing happens in a pot or a pan, and you use a little bit of butter in there. How do you saute without the oil part? This is how you do it. And there's two different ways. You can do a dry saute or a wet saute. And then I explain that and show it in the videos. And so, yeah, there's two courses out there, the simple techniques and the advanced techniques. And I've had thousands of people who've purchased the course, and I get probably a 99% positive feedback. There is the occasional person who who buys it and they're like, oh no, I thought this was just like a little bit of vegetables incorporated in my regular meal, but you're doing SOS free. I can't do this. Can I get a refund? I was like, sure, no problem.
That's funny. That is very funny. Can you show us a little bit, teach us just a little bit about how we can learn to either cook SOS or incorporate some of the principles?
Let's get to that part. So let me get rid of the chair and stretch a little bit. All right. So I'm going to adjust the camera now, so you can see what I'm doing. So I have my pot here. And I'll show you what I have at the cutting board. So this is going to be, since we're talking about the SOS-free aspect of, what we do at True North, I'm going to make a quick SOS-free dish. So I'm going to make a dish without oil, salt, or sugar, which would normally have oil, salt, and sugar. And so that it'll illustrate the point of how we do things at True North. Sound good? So I have here, it's going to be a 5-ingredient dish. I have some onions, apples, Swiss chard. I have some mustard here. And then we're also going to use a little bit of vegetable broth back here. So let's get started. I have my pot here, which it's empty. Okay. I think the light is making it sort of, there we go. So there's nothing in the pot. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And I'm going to wait for it to heat up. Okay. As I wait for that, I'm going to quickly dice my onion real over here. So this is going to be a dry sauteing, meaning I'm going to go through all the motions of regular sauteing, but the only difference is I'm going to do it without any oil, without any butter, without any lard, duck fats, bacon fats, sesame seed oil, peanut oil, or anything like that. So that's the first part, but no oil. And as I cook it, I'll show you the pot. Let me see if this makes a difference. I think that'll work better.
I was going to ask you, can any pot be used for these type of cooking methods?
Yeah, I think so. You could use any pot. However, I always recommend that people use a stainless steel, which is what I use here at home and then what I use at work. Other cookware can be used, but as I go along with this, you'll see why the stainless steel is my preferred cookware. So now I'm putting my hands, over the pot just to feel the radiating heat. And it's sort of like if you've ever grilled anything, you know that you turn the grill on and you wait for it to get nice and hot before you add your items. And in goes the onion. And as soon as I put the onion in, you hear that sizzle effect going on. As a matter of fact, I'll show you, some of the onions are jumping sort of by themselves. And what that means is that the hot metal comes in contact with the onions and it starts to heat up the water molecules in there, which makes them sort of move around. So a little bit of time just to caramelize the natural sugars in the onions. So in the onions, there is a little bit of sugar, and that's what's going to brown up. Okay. And if you've ever sauteed anything, when you hear that sizzle, it sounds pretty much like you're sauteing. Okay. So even the sound of it can be pretty much the same. All right. So we'll give the onions here another minute or so, probably not even that long. While they brown up, I'm going to quickly dice my apples here. Give this a quick stir. We're almost ready. I'll show it to you in just a moment. Okay, the apples are ready. So I'm going to show you, they're not quite there yet, almost, but I'll show you the bottom of the pot here. As you can see, that natural browning of it. So that's what I'm chasing. I'm chasing that. There you go. I'm chasing that caramelization that occurs naturally within the onions. Or, you know, I don't have any garlic right now, which I should have had. Just because onions and garlic always provide a good depth of flavor. But if you have garlic, or you have the onions, or your carrots, or your mushrooms, or some other vegetables, what you'll end up doing is caramelizing those natural sugars. And I have one little piece here. Oh, if I can show you there, that is the browning of the onion right there. Okay. At the same time that I'm browning, I'm also evaporating the natural water content in the onions. So by volume, I'm concentrating the flavor. I'm developing and concentrating the flavor sort of at the same time. Okay, so now that goes in. So there's the no oil part. And now we're going to do the salt part by adding some chard. So greens like Swiss chard and kale and beet greens are high in natural sodium content. Okay, so that goes in. So this is like a sauteed chard action going on. I can go in many different directions. I could add a little bit of balsamic vinegar to this so that I would have a salty and sour sort of combination between the chard and the vinegar. I could also achieve the same thing if I added some lemon or orange. Okay, but I mentioned we were gonna, you know, sort of do that focus on that SOS-free thing. So along with this, we did the no oil. We did the salt there with the chard. Now I'm doing the sugar by adding some diced apples. Okay. So now this is sort of a sweet and salty combination that I'm trying to put together. Okay. And I'll show you what that looks like now. See?
I would eat that right now. I'm hungry. It's lunchtime here.
See? Camera back. I'll go this way. It's a lot easier. That way I don't have to move the camera a bunch of times. So that's what it looks like right now. My onions are there for depth of flavor, and then I'm working off of the salty and sweet combination. Okay. Now, for some people, they might say, well, it sort of looks good. I understand the process, but, you know, I still need that something else, that saucy spices. Otherwise, I'm just going to think, well, that's just sort of plain vegan food that I don't really want to eat. And I'll say, okay, not a problem. I just need you to understand that I'm chasing this right here. if you can see it, which is that nice browning at the bottom of the pot, which is those natural sugars that are coming off of the onions and the apples. And now, if you want a little bit more flavor, sure, we can add some mustard to this. Mustard being a spice, a combination of spices, and there's a little bit of vinegar in here as well. So we're adding a sour component to this as well. And so now we're able to get a little bit more complexity and flavor in here. And I'm going to add just a hint. I actually don't even think I need it, but since I have it here and I said I was going to use it, we're going to add a little bit of vegetable broth to this, just to make it a little bit, give it a little bit more moisture and to get a little bit more sauce out of it. And it also helps me to glaze the bottom of the pan. So all those, all that browning that happened naturally, you know, I'm able to scrape it up. And so now, yeah.
Do you think it makes a big difference using broth over water? I know you make your own broth at the True North Health Center, but for those of us just cooking at home, does it make a difference using the boxed broths versus water in most recipes?
I never use water in cooking because it dilutes the flavor. So as I was saying, you know, we're evaporating the natural water in the onions and then the chard so that we concentrate the flavors. Okay, we have the same amount of flavor in that piece of onion that was raw, and now that it's been cooked, there's still that same amount of flavor. But because we've gotten rid of the water, we have concentrated the flavor because by volume, there's less of it. And so if at some point I add water back into this, then I've sort of gone backwards a little bit. It is very easy to just add some water to something like this and say, okay, done. But again, the objective here is to come up with something where people are going to say, okay, this is pretty tasty. I would like to have it again. I do make my own broth. And I would recommend that people do that. But if you don't, and you're sort of wanting to get started and just to sort of take that first step, and sure, that packaged low sodium broth is a good start. So
I know you have recipes for it in your books for homemade broth.
yes. Okay. So there we go. Put a piece of apple there right on top. And so this is a, you know, very flavorful combination. I know that it works because I'm playing off of that sweet and salty combination between the chard and the apples. But then I add that layer of the mustard flavor and it just becomes a really nice, enjoyable dish.
Apple's delicious. You know what my brain is saying to add to it though? Like
What's that?
A tiny bit of yellow raisins.
I don't have any, but yeah, you could add something like that. I would to this. I would add maybe a little bit of apricots. Like I certainly could have started with some diced dried apricots and at some point add them in there. You know, that's what I would do.
All right. Well, that was great. And it didn't take that long and it really wasn't that complicated.
No. So to me, food doesn't have to be overworked. It doesn't have to be like you go to some of these restaurants and they're great places to eat a meal that you want to remember, you know, the French Laundries of the world, where everything is like meticulously put together. And sure, I'd still like to go there, you know, someday. It's on my bucket list. But to me, you know, a enjoyable everyday meal is something like this, you know, good contrasting flavors put together, quick and simple preparation, not too fussy, you know, good to go. Certainly I can do this with some rice, like steamed rice. So we were talking about steamed rice earlier. So steamed rice, just to give me that bulk of calories, which are going to be satiating, and then all these nice flavors put together, and you know, boom, there you go. That could be a good lunch.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful demonstration for explaining, you know, why SOS free and how to do it. And, you know, I just want to say that all the doctors at True North, all the people that work there are wonderful. And we hear wonderful stories of people getting well. But without you there, it would be a building with water. I mean, you play
yeah, kind of. You know, as I mentioned before earlier, I think the doctors who are into this in this movement, the ones at True North, and then other ones doing great things all over the country and the world, they have a great thing going, and it makes a lot of sense. Certainly, as a society, we're not the healthiest here in America, and so they're doing wonderful work. I just, you know, I'm part of that whole movement, and you know, they do the science and the really smart things, and then I make it taste good. You know, that's my contribution to the thing, you know, both at True North and through my website, as I mentioned, bravopv.com. A lot of resources you can find there. And so I just do my part. I know how to make it taste good, and they know how to, you know, explain the science and the reasoning behind it, and the numbers in your blood work. And like to this day, I don't know the blood pressure, and then there's those two numbers, you know, like they'll say 120/70. I don't know what that means. And people are like, oh, this was so good, and I'm like, well, what does the first number mean, and what does the second number mean? Because I have no idea. But I know how to make food taste good, you know, so that's my that's my 2 cents.
Well, the patients and the staff are lucky to have you. I know the patients appreciate you, and I sure hope Dr. Goldhammer does. Maybe I'll ask him, because he's going to be coming up on the last day of the True North Health Week.
Okay, yeah, you ask him. Say, hey, you know, what do you really think of this chef? Is he doing a good job?
Yeah, because he always makes that joke. We're True North Health Center, where we make good food taste not bad, but that's not true, because you make healthy food taste delicious.
Oh, that's what I try to do, at least every day.
And you do it very well. Thank you so much, Chef Bravo. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow as we continue with True North Health Week with Chris Rule, another wonderful True North employee. Thanks again, Chef Bravo. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, AJ. Good to see you again. Take care.
Bye-bye.